Hello and welcome to another Unreal Engine live stream. Today we're going to be taking a look at making mobile games with UDK. Now, to a lot of folks, that means we're making iOS games, which is true, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward. We have a lot of things to cover today. I do want to mention straight out of the gate, though, that we are going to be using the latest build of UDK, so hopefully you've already got that installed if you plan to follow along, and if you can't for whatever reason, I'm sure this will end up on YouTube later and you can follow at your leisure. Now, we are considering this to be an intermediate level stream, so not too many advanced concepts today, but certainly not a lot of beginner stuff either. I'll be going over some Kismet stuff, mostly because that's cool and awesome and I love doing that. But for the most part, this is going to be intermediate level. So for starters, I want to give a quick rundown of everything we're going to be talking about. So I want to go into the process of getting your games onto a mobile platform, specifically iOS. We're going to talk about all the tools you need to really make that happen. We're going to take a look at several different types of game that you can create with UDK. Of course, there is kind of a stigma. I don't really like talking about this, but it does go around. A lot of people think that UDK is primarily for first and third person shooters. And for sure, Epic has a history of making those types of games, but really the truth is you can make any kind of game you want with UDK, and I'm going to show you a variety of different games that you can make, including a racing game. We're also going to take a look at the MOBA starter kit that you can download for UDK right now if you want to make your own game in the style of classics that everybody's playing right now, like Dota or League of Legends or that kind of stuff. So lots of cool stuff to cover. We're also going to talk about mobile optimization today. So things that you need to keep in mind during the development phase, especially toward the end of it, to make sure that your game is going to run well on the mobile platform of your choice. So I guess with that, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing, now I hope nobody reaches through the screen and tries to hurt me for this, but I do have some PowerPoint presentations, and really the only reason is so that for those who'd like to take notes, it makes it a little easier and I can talk more while showing something on the screen. So let's start here. Now I made these, okay? These weren't just handed to me. First off, I already kind of mentioned this. Obviously there's a common misconception that UDK is great for only first and third person shooter games, and we can really make any kind of game that we want. It's just a question of how far you want to go. Now, we're going to look at 4 different types of game today. We're going to take a look at Epic Citadel, which I call an environment explorer. Now, I'll probably end up I'll go into a tangent about this a little later, but there are a lot of folks who tell me all the time that Epic Citadel is not really a game. It's just a tech demo, it's a walkthrough. But I think it's a game, and I'll go into why a little bit later. We're going to make it a game before the day's out. Top-down shooter, which is the Jazz Jackrabbit demo. This is fortunately also included with UDK, so you can check it out. It's a game that's made entirely in Kismet, which is very cool. For those of you who are getting started, maybe feeling a little intimidated by actually having to write Unreal script code. We're going to take a look at the Epic Racer Starter Kit. Now this does not come with UDK for download. I mean, it's not automatically there, but it is available for you to download from the UDN. We're going to talk about where you can get it and the process you can go through to get it installed. So if you want to make your own racing game, we've got your back and we can help you get going. We're also going to take a look at the MOBA Starter Kit, the Multiplayer Online Battle Arena, because that's all the rage right now. Everybody loves MOBA games, and maybe you've been thinking of one and you'd like to kind of create one in your own image. UDK can handle that, and we've got a starter kit that will get you going. First, a word about Android, because I think as soon as we announced this, there were several people I know hitting me up. I know there's a lot of talk on Facebook. Everybody wants to deploy on Android. And of course, UDK only runs on Windows, and you can develop for PC and iOS. Out of the box, we all know you can't deploy to Android straight from UDK. So what I always tell everybody is go ahead and make your game for iOS. You've still got to make the game one way or the other, and iOS is still a mobile platform. If your game will work on iOS, it's going to work on other mobile platforms as well, but get up to that point. Once you get there, contact Epic Games. We're really good about working with up-and-coming indies. We will see that you get what you need. At the end of the day, we want your game out there just as badly as you do, if not maybe a little bit more, to be honest. And so we've got your back. get your game made, go through the motions, get it on iOS, get it deployed even just to an iPad, and then contact us and show it to us and show us that you've got something you're serious about, that it does play, and then we will work with you. So don't take the fact that you can't deploy straight to Android from UDK as any kind of a detriment, because we can get it to Android, no worries. Okay, so some of the tools that you will need. First off, UDK. This is helpful, because really, without this, I'm not sure what you're going to do. For mobile games, you're going to need some sort of an iOS device. If you don't already have one, you can probably get an older one on eBay these days for fairly cheap. If you want to make an iOS game and actually get it even just on an iOS device, you're going to need an iOS dev license. That's $99. That's not us. That's Apple. So just write that off at the beginning. UDK Remote, which we're going to talk about just a little bit later. This is an app that is free on the Apple App Store, and this allows you to use your iOS device like a controller to test out your mobile controls during the development process. It's super, super useful for testing, especially because it allows you to test in the editor as if you were using your mobile device without having to deploy each and every time you want to just see how something is working. It's different than testing, and you shouldn't immediately associate using UDK Remote with actually testing your game. That's a whole different thing, and we'll talk about that a little later. So actually, we're going to talk a little bit about it right now. So it's not a performance test. This app is very easy to set up. I will mention that even though it is easy to set up, in many cases, it will require you to forward a port on your home router. I've seen that numerous times, even at my house. I've got to forward a port for it. If you don't know how to do that, there is a website. It's completely third party. I have nothing to do with it. I believe it is portforward.com, and they have steps for just about every type of router on the market. And if it's not that website, I'm sure a Google search will help you find the appropriate one. Now, another tool that I think everyone needs, and this is more for just mobile. More than for just mobile. If you want to make quality games with UDK, especially for getting started, definitely check out the programming gems that we have available over on the UDN. They are a massive help. There are a huge variety of different tools, techniques, tips, tricks, things that we've used in our games, things that other developers have used. They're all super useful. You should go check out the website, which is udn.epicgames.com/3/developmentkitgems.html. And if you are trying to type that into a browser right now, please note that it is case sensitive. So the capital 3, D, K, and G all need to be there, and you can go right there. If you misspell it, it'll dump you to the UDN homepage. So just so you know. So you'll also need an IDE or a text editor. Some folks use Visual Studio for this. I think Visual Studio requires a plugin to really make it sing, but there's a lot of options for that. I use Notepad++, so just throwing that out. And then, of course, if you're making an entire game, you need some sort of digital content creation application library. So this includes things like Photoshop, 3ds Max, Maya. If you're trying to get everything on the cheap or on the free, you've got tools such as the GIMP for image editing. You've got Blender for actual 3D modeling and whatnot. So you've got a lot of options. Okay, so that is the list of everything we're going to be talking about. I'm going to go ahead and jump into the first couple of games we're going to talk about, just because we only just really got started here. So I want to talk a little bit about Epic Citadel. Now, this is actually included with UDK. Hopefully at this point you're familiar with Epic Citadel. It's been out for a while. It started off releasing on iOS. It's also since then released on Android. There's a Flash version available. There's an HTML5 version available. So obviously this demo gets around, but if you downloaded UDK and you didn't know, you've got it there too. So if you go to Open and jump to, let me go to Maps, and then to Mobile, you'll see you have epiccitadel.udk. Now this is the actual file that was deployed to make the game that you can get on the App Store right now, which is very useful because it allows you to kind of pick things apart and see how the first Unreal Engine 3 tech demo was made on your own. Now, I get a lot of talk from folks, as I mentioned earlier, that this isn't necessarily a game. So Actually, let me jump forward. I know how to operate PowerPoint, really. I'm actually much better with UDK than I am with PowerPoint. I feel like I should mention that straight out. So obviously, this was the first demonstration of Unreal Engine 3 on a mobile device. It's a fully explorable 3D environment. It still has great visuals. I mean, really, for a phone, it looks amazing. Let's face it. Now, it's included with UDK, as I just showed you. Most of the navigation is handled via Unreal Script within a class called Castle Game. If you wanted to take that apart, you can actually use that as a basis to make similarly navigable games. Now, this is currently available on all the different platforms that I mentioned, and of course, there's the big question of, is it really a game? Because there's nothing for you to do except walk around. Now, I'm going to take just a second and play this back in my view. If you just play it back, of course you can use WSAD. If you didn't know, and this is going to be an important thing as you start making your own mobile games, we have a mobile previewer inside of UDK that allows you to simulate what your game is going to play like on a mobile device. Now, this is up here in the main toolbar. We've got some previewer settings, which if you click on this, you can choose the resolution you want to play back. Are you going to be playing in landscape or portrait? And you can choose a feature set for the type of iOS device you're going to be using. So right now I use an iPhone 4S, so we'll just go ahead and set it to that, save the settings, and I'll fire up the mobile previewer. This takes a second to load. I'll probably be loading it several times throughout the day, so we'll just kind of have to wait a second for it to get here. And here it comes. And here you can actually use your mouse cursor as if it was a touch input. Now, in the case of Epic Citadel, you can still drag the mouse for a touch, but you can use WSA and D as well. So what I want to do is just take you down the stairs to the right and over here. So there's a portcullis here that does nothing. It's just kind of there to make this feel a little more castle-like. And my big beef with folks who don't think Epic Citadel is a game is that there are a lot of games. Okay, maybe not a lot of games. There are some meaningful games that I have cherished and have blown my mind that had very little interactivity in the sense that you weren't picking up a gun and shooting things. You weren't solving puzzles. One of my favorites, it still stands out to me, is Dear Esther. Now, this was hit and miss. I know a lot of people didn't like it. I thought it was a good narrative. I thought the format was really interesting to tell a story in a 3D and interactive environment. So even if you didn't like Dear Esther, it does pave the way for a lot of really unique storytelling style of environments. So what if you just wanted to take something that was basically wandering around and add just a little bit of interactivity to it? Cool thing is you can actually do that in Kismet, which is what we're going to do here. So I'm going to take a bit of an aside away from just showing off games, and we are going to add some interactivity to Epic Citadel, which we're going to keep really simple for starters. We're going to make this into a portcullis door that you can open and close entirely within Kismet. But if you want to follow along, please do. It's a good little exercise to go through in Kismet. But I want you to be thinking in the back of your head about different ways that this type of thought can be applied. You know, how could you take this and turn it into a puzzle that you could solve? Or you know, maybe you open the appropriate door to get into the next area, or use it to trigger another event. There's all kinds of ways you could set this up. So for starters, this is just a static mesh. So that's not going to help us too much because it doesn't move. So I'm going to open up the content browser, which is off camera, and I'll be doing a lot of this. I'll be bringing in the content browser and making it go away quite a bit. Go ahead and right-click on this portcullis, and we're going to jump down to Finding Content Browser, which is up near the top, actually. Now, here is the static mesh that we're using, which is very cool. But right next to it is a much taller one, which is going to be more useful for us. So we're going to select the taller version, and I'll get the content browser back out of the way. I'm going to right-click and replace this mesh. Now, obviously, this context menu is huge, and if it intimidates you a little bit, don't worry, you get the hang of it once you kind of break down the general areas. But about 4/5 of the way down, there's Replace With, and you want to choose Interp Actor, and you'll see the path to it is SMGate02. So that replaces this with the taller version of the portcullis, which is cool, but it's also a mover. Now the catch with it being a mover is it's still trying to do all kinds of stuff with lighting, and to keep everything nice and light for the sake of mobile, we're going to basically kill out any lighting that was going on here. Now I already had some categories open from apparently the last time I tried to do this. So I'll show you how to navigate to this. We're going to go under Dynamic SM Actor, dynamic static mesh component, and then down underneath lighting. We don't need this to cast a shadow, we don't need it to cast a dynamic shadow, and we don't need it to cast static shadow. Just kill off all I mean, the first checkbox technically does it, but I like making sure all my checkboxes are cleaned up. We can let it accept lights and dynamic lights, though. If you kill both of those out, then the thing doesn't, well, it just stays black, really. Okay, so we're going to move this to a beginning position, so kind of up in the air. You can gauge for yourself how high up you want it to go. So take your pick. I'll put it right about here for now because I don't want it to take too long to go up and down. All right, so we've got a new portcullis in place. It's ready to be animated, but we need something to make that happen. We need some reason for this to open. Now, an easy solution would be just to drop in a trigger, and it could be straight proximity, and that could fire off a matinee that would open the gate, and that would be cool. But I feel like that's kind of cheating, right? Because this is obviously, you know, medieval times, and if it just walked up and opened, then we've got a really observant guard somewhere, or we've got automatic garage door openers. And if we've got automatic garage door openers, then, I mean, I just see all these other problems. You know, Knight gets off horse, reaches over his shoulder, and hits the, you know, keyless entry lock, and his horse chirps at him twice. I don't like it. So we're going to keep this a little more realistic. When we walk up to the gate, we're going to make a button appear on our iOS device that allows us to open the gate. And when we hit that button, it's actually going to say on the button, open. And it's going to be cheap. We're not going to worry too much about making a pretty button with textures and stuff, just for time's sake. But when we hit that, it'll open up the gate, and the button will automatically change to close gate, and we can just, you know, hit back and forth and open and close the gate at will. You won't actually see a character reach up and grab the gate and do anything fancy, but that one little level of interactivity goes a long way. So with all that, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to open up Unreal Kismet, and you'll see there's already a lot of Kismet going on here. Okay, not that much, but there's plenty. We're going to kind of move away from all that, kind of get off into our own space. I like to be able to see all the other stuff, keep things relatively organized, so we'll slide over here to something kind of out of the way. Now, I've got Kismet open. Let me get it kind of off screen for just a moment. The first thing we need is a trigger. This trigger is what is actually going to be used to bring our button up onto the screen. So we'll right-click, add actor, and we'll just bring in a regular plain Jane trigger. Now, I think it's because of the confines of the hallway, but our trigger gets placed way back here behind us. I think that has to do with where it thought my mouse was colliding. I don't care, it's fine. Just to make sure that everything goes where it belongs, I'm going to put the portcullis down. I guess we can start with it closed. That makes more sense. At least that way it's like an obstacle, right? And we'll put the trigger right in the middle of the door, because that makes the most sense to me. We'll open up the trigger. Now, its collision radius is set to 40, which is not entirely useless, but it's pretty close. So we're going to crank this up. Let's try, I always try to use those powers of two numbers for Unreal. 256 seems to fit in pretty nicely. Let's increase the height for no other reason than I want to. So there we go. We have a nice cylinder that goes on either side of the door, and I think that's going to work out well. So we can go ahead and close our properties, save a little bit of screen space. I'll come over here to Kismet, and we'll make sure that we can see the trigger and the Kismet window. With my trigger selected, I will right-click, create a new event using trigger 14, and this can just be a regular touch event. Please, please, please make sure the very first thing you do is jump in here and set your max trigger count to 0. If you don't do that, then this will only work the first time you walk up to the trigger, which is pretty irritating. All right, now we're going to build this effect up, and when you are kind of it's almost like sketching with Kismet, right? Like you'll have an idea of something you want to do. I recommend you don't ever try to put it all together at once. Don't jump into a Kismet sequence and just think, okay, here's what I need to do. I'm just going to put the whole thing together from one end to the other. Piecemeal it out. That way you can test each and every part as you go, and you can add complexity as you need it. So for starters, we're just going to make a proximity trigger. We will walk up to this gate, gate will go up, and we continue. So that's easy to do. Let's select our portcullis. We'll right-click and make a new matinee. And there's our matinee node. We'll double-click to open up matinee. And hopefully you've seen this before. If you haven't, don't worry. We'll come over here to the group track list. That is this dark gray bar on the left-hand side. Right-click and create a new empty group, which I will call Portcullis Movement. I think I can spell portcullis. Hopefully nobody comes back and says, dude, you just butchered that, but we'll see. Okay, so I'm going to right click on this group. Oh, by the way, before you do this, it's always a good idea to just double check back in Kismet and make sure that the appropriate actor got attached to that. If you guys saw the last live stream we did, I might have killed that a couple of times. That could have happened. So now I'm trying to be a little more careful. So let's go down to the new movement track. So basically I just right clicked on the group, new movement track, because we're obviously going to be moving something. Now, we've got our first keyframe in, and that's super handy. We don't really have to do anything there. Let's go to about 3 seconds out-ish. It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, the less perfect it is, the more natural it'll feel, usually. And we'll press Enter to add another keyframe. Make sure you see Adjust Key Movement 1 in the bottom of your screen, and we'll just slide this up at least tall enough where we won't, clip our face on it or anything, and I think that's going to work out just fine. And we can scrub to make sure we've got some motion. Now by default that's going to have that sort of auto-clamped nature, so it'll ease in and ease out, so it'll accelerate and then decelerate. That's fine. It makes it look a little less robotic. So we're done with Matinee. We can close it. Goodbye. Now, to make this work and just make sure everything works well, we're just going to take touch and set it to play. We'll take untouch and connect it to reverse. And let's go ahead and slide Matinee off to the side, or I'm sorry, Kismet off to the side. I was staring at the Matinee node, and we'll test this out. Now I'm going to do this with the mobile previewer, mostly on principle, even though it takes just a second to load. Okay, so here we go. We're navigating. We always have that same player start, which I suppose I could move, but I feel like this builds up tension, right? And dramatic tension is supposed to be important. Oh, and the gate goes up. Now hopefully when we back away, we should see it go back down. And it goes back down. Perfect. That's exactly what I want to see. I do feel like 3 seconds is a little long, or, okay, for a final project, it's just right. For me trying to show you stuff, it's really short and annoying. Well, too long and annoying? I think that's what I meant to say. So let's grab the keyframe here. So that's my second keyframe. We're going to hold down Control and just drag it in to a little less than 2 seconds. And then I'm going to take my timeline and right-click on the red flag at the end and choose Move to Longest Track Endpoint. So it's going to move a little faster than it probably should, but it does mean it'll get to where we want it to go more quickly. Okay, so we know motion works. The next thing we need to do is basically trade this out so that we're no longer moving this. As a matter of fact, let's just go ahead and over here in Kismet, we'll disconnect our trigger. We don't want it to move things anymore. We want to create a button when the player walks into this trigger. Now this is a cool thing because we're actually showing how to add greater levels of interactivity into your mobile game by way of Kismet. So right click, let's go to New Action, let's go down to Mobile, and we're going to add an input zone. All right, so when we touch the trigger, we want to add this input zone, and now let's get this set up. First off, we need a zone name. I should keep this simple for the sake of a demonstration, but if you wanted to have a lot of different things with which you're interacting, one, you may want to consider going into scripting, but two, you would probably want to make sure that your names are nice and unique. So we're going to call this the portcullis button, and if I knew what entrance I was at, like if I knew I was at the south entrance to the castle, which I think I am, I would say like south portcullis entrance, but we'll just say portcullis button and press enter. New zone is going to be looking for a certain type of input. We're going to say a UDK mobile input zone. Now there's some setup to do here, and it's real easy to lose track. So I'm just going to kind of go area by area and just touch on the important stuff. First off, so under zone, a zone type of button is perfect. Touchpad index of 0 we're not going to mess with, but caption, we're going to say open gate. So that'll actually be the caption that is printed right on the button itself. Then input. All right, input key, we don't really care about any of this. This is all if you want to start associating various keys with this button. It's not going to make any difference to us. We're actually going to make a very specific action happen when this button is interacted with. Bounds. This is where we set up how the button is drawn on the screen. And this, the first time you do it, will probably require a little bit of trial and error. So in X, actually before I even punch in a value, I want to scroll down a little bit. We can punch in specific values, and you'll notice this is how you define the top left corner of the button's placement. So X and Y is just where the button's going to be placed. But if we set this to relative, this becomes, at least in my opinion, a little easier to work with, because now you have a 0 to 1 value that takes you all the way across the screen, either horizontally for x or vertically for y. So we're going to take x and we'll set it to 0.5, so that'll be halfway across our screen horizontally. And remember, it said top left corner, so we're working down in y. It's a little, I mean, if you're used to graph paper where y points up, it's a little counterintuitive, but once you get the hang of it, it's perfect. So we're going to set this to 0.8 or 0.9. Let's say 0.9, and if I want to change it, I can. Now, we have size x and y. This is a size in pixels. If you want your size to be relative as well, you can do the same thing. It becomes a 0 to 1 value, which represents a percentage of the screen. That's useful, and the reason you go to these relative values is if you know you're going to be jumping resolutions, i.e. if you're going from you know, a little iPhone to an iPhone 4 with a Retina screen, or to an iPad, and then you know, the newer iPads with a Retina screen. So when you don't really know what the pixels are, working in relative space can really save you some time and headache and stuff. So we can check relative size x, y. I'm going to leave this off there for no other reason than I just want to. I have no excuse. We're going to set this to 400 pixels, which on an iPad screen, which I have one and we'll be playing with a little bit later, that's going to be a pretty small button. So it's just food for thought. But this is really all for sake of example. Okay, so we've got our size, we've got our general position. Ooh, another one. Center x and y. I love these because I tend not to be able to think very well in terms of placing a button by positioning its upper, well, it's from your perspective, upper left corner. To me, that's annoying. So I'll set center x and y because that way I can position my button based on the button center. So I know exactly where it's going to be, and that makes my life a lot happier. Okay, so we need to test this and make sure that this is indeed making a button appear. So I'm going to slide this out of the way. And let's go ahead and bring up the mobile previewer. We'll give this a moment. And let's rush in. And I must have hit I clicked down, so it created a little arrow. And we'll fly over to where our gate's supposed to be, or run, because you get that camera wobble, right? Oh, there you go. So there is our button. It says open gate. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want. Now there's a catch. If I back out and I go back over to the trigger, you'll notice my button got a little brighter. And if I do it again, my button gets brighter still and then continues to get brighter. And what that's doing is that's creating that button over and over again on top of that. Obviously, that's not what we want. But that illustrates why we need our next node, which is the ability to destroy that button. So I'm going to right-click, go to New Action, and we'll jump down to Mobile, and we will clear input zones. And we'll just connect this to untouch. Now we need to specify what it is we are removing. So let's make sure we select this. Actually, I don't want to clear input zones. I don't know. That's not right. If I clear input zones, that wipes out everything. Excuse me. Horrible idea. Let's go back to mobile, and we want to remove a specific input zone. That's what I meant to say. I saw those properties. I was like, no, that's not right. Okay, so let's see. Now, we just have to give this a zone name. Now, you can, if you remember exactly what you typed, by all means, type it again. I'm going to copy paste just to make sure I don't misspell anything on camera. So what this will do is this will delete that button when we untouch. So let's give this a try real quick. Back to the mobile previewer. All right. So now we run up. I really should move that player start. I probably won't. I'm just saying. I'll probably forget to. And boom, we have a button. That's awesome. Move back. Oh, button goes away. Button comes back. Button goes away. Now, at the moment, I'm going to point out a problem that we're going to solve a little later, but we can walk through the gate right now. And if we cross the other side, button also goes away. So that 3D radius is working really well for us. That's exactly what we want to see. Okay, so we have a button. Now we need to make this button actually do something. This is where you get into the actual interactivity part, and this is cool stuff. So let's scoot these around, a little bit of organization. I'm going to right-click and go to New Event. And we can jump down to the Input category, and you'll see Mobile Button Access. This basically means that somebody has hit a mobile button, just like the kind that we just created on our screen a moment ago. We'll select this. Now, fortunately, this already has a max trigger count of 0. That makes my life much easier. It means one less number I have to change, right? We do need to specify the target zone name. So what name is this listening out for? And I already copied the name, so I can hit Control-V and paste portcullis button right in. Now it's pretty easy. There's one other checkbox I do want to point out. It's real easy to overlook. Send pressed only on touch down. If you do not do this, then the whole time you're holding your finger on the button, it just keeps triggering the event over and over again. Don't let that happen to you. Now, you can make the choice yourself if it makes more sense for the event to be fired on touch down or touch up. In some cases, it might be better when they actually remove their finger from the screen. But we'll do on touch down. On input pressed, we will play. So that's easy enough. Let's go ahead and move Kismet out of the way, and let's do another test. And here we are, passing the sword and shield, grabbing a quick pint of ale, staggering, yeah, because 1 pint would make me stagger, over to the gate, and we have a button, we hit it, and there you go. Now, the catch is that there's no way for our button to lower the gate at the moment, but again, that's why I like kind of layering these effects on. Okay, so now we want the ability to close the gate when we hit the button. Now, this means that we need to be aware of our gate's state at all times. The way we're going to become aware of it is to store that state into a variable. So I'm going to right-click out here in empty space, and we'll create a new variable. It'll be a Boolean, and I'm going to go straight over to its sequence variable category and set the var name to portcullis. Actually, let's do capital P. I don't know why. Portcullis. Now, how do I want to start this? We'll name it open. Now you notice I took a second to think, what did I want to name this? Did I want to name it portcullis open or portcullis closed? The default value of a Boolean is false, and my door is starting out false. So I'm going to set this to open because this will be set to true when the player has actually gone up and done something. Now you'll notice I didn't immediately come over here and start plugging this in. I am a big proponent of using named variables and keeping all of my variables kind of off to the side and neat and clean. So now that we've got that, let's come over here onto another area of empty space, create a new variable, and this will be a named variable. In its properties, take the find var name and set it to, actually do this in lowercase just for the fun of it. Watch, portcullis open, all in lowercase, and when you hit enter, it will automatically adjust the case to what you typed the first time, and this will become a green check mark. That's how you know you did it right, and you can spell. So that's useful. Okay, so when we press this button, we want to change the value of this variable so that we are keeping track of the current state of our door. So I'm just going to disconnect this wire for the time being. We'll right-click, new action, go to set variable, and we will set a Boolean. Our target is going to be this named variable. Now, because this is a named variable, it's kind of like it's wirelessly talking to this portcullis open variable. So if you're unfamiliar with how named variables work, you have kind of your base variable off to the side who's not really connected to anything. I mean, he can be, but traditionally he's not. And then over here you can have as many named variables you want, and as long as the names match, it's like a wireless connection between the two. So anytime I change this named variable, it is in fact adjusting the original variable that we created way over here. That's just if you're not used to working with these. Okay. So now let's right-click here on our value input, and we'll create a new Boolean variable, and we'll set its value to true. We could have gone into our set node and actually told it to set the default value to checked, which is the same as 1. However, I like seeing them on the outside without having to click and look at properties, so I will generally always create another variable so I can see that we're going to take portcullis open, we're going to set it to true. So that'll be our first thing. We'll set this value to true, and then we'll hit play. Now this is where things start to get a little bit fun because we're setting this value, but now this alone won't really do anything other than change an internal variable. There's no point in testing it because right now it's going to do the exact same thing it did a second ago. There's a little more work going on under the hood because we're changing a Boolean, but not much else. So I'm going to change stuff around just a little bit. First thing we're going to do is actually check the value of this variable. So let's right click, go to new condition, do a comparison, and do a compare bool. And we'll plug this. When we push the button, we're going to check the value of portcullis open. I'm just going to copy this. I want to kind of point this out to those of you who are kind of new to Kismet. You have a choice when you're doing your visual scripting. You can choose to either have things like named variables, remote events, and really keep your wires from spaghettiing everywhere. That helps readability in some cases. Depending on who you're talking to, some folks don't like to work that way. Like, I know there's plenty of people out there who would much rather see something like this, just so that we know that both of these nodes are talking to the same value. It's just a matter of personal preference. Me, I don't mind seeing the different names everywhere, and this looks like it flows better to me. Your mileage may vary. If you like seeing a bunch of things connecting to as few variables as possible, do it. It's not really changing anything either way. Okay, so we're checking the value of portcullis open. Is it open right now? Okay, when we first start out, ask yourself, is the gate open? No, it's closed. So if it's closed, we want to set this value to true, and we want to go ahead and open the gate. Now, we can test this, and this will give us a little bit of a change in behavior. Also, I'm going to take this guy. I knew you were around here somewhere. I'm just going to move you along to where I want you to be. And that's much closer. I think we can go from there. So let's try this out again on the mobile previewer. Let's see, did I get where I wanted to be? Yes, I did. And there we go. So I can walk up, and we get a button. I can click the button, and whoop, nothing is happening. Let's see what's going on here, because I figured something should happen, but I could be wrong here. Okay, so we are taking our value, portcullis open. Oh, I plugged into result. Whoops, wrong switch. This is the guy I wanted to check. Forget what you just saw a second ago. Let's try it again. This time with more feeling and 4-part harmony. Hit the open gate button and it opens. Excellent. But if I hit it again, we get nothing. Because if you think about the logic, we're hitting the button again, it's checking this value, and it's saying, hey, what is portcullis open? Is it true or false? Right now it's set to true, and nothing happens. So that's less than ideal, obviously. So let's go ahead and make sure that we kill the mobile previewer. Now, let's fix this up so our logic is doing some more stuff. This is pretty easy to do. We're just going to take our little set Boolean value here. We're going to duplicate it. That's Control W to duplicate. And we'll disconnect the wire. If true, we want to take that value and set it to false. So really what that's saying is, if the door is open, set this value back to false, and then we want to close the door. This should already work. So let's go ahead and give this another test with yon mobile previewer. Sorry, I have loading music in my head all the time. It's usually better than that. Not today, though. All right, so open, it's working. You can watch it go up, hit it again, and it closes. Excellent, and we can do that all day long. All right, now I'm going to throw out just a little handy, useful tip out there. If there are any OCD people in the room, congratulations. If the fact that these wires cross is kind of driving you crazy right now, like, but I want what goes up to stay up above, you can do that. Here's what we're going to do, though. I'm going to put the false one on top because that connects to play, and I want this to be play on top. I like that better. And then if you hold down Control, you can drag these little connections, so we can put false on top, and that untangles the wires. So if little things like that get under your skin, and you're like, oh, but I can't take the wire crossing, you can uncross them. Don't cross the streams, right? Okay, so this is working. There's only one catch I can think of left, and that is that our button is not doing what we want it to do. Because our button right now, if we take a look, well, okay, let's not take a look because it takes a little bit too much time. Our button always says open gate, and that's not what we want. We want a button that as soon as we do stuff is going to update so that it'll say close the gate, and it'll say open the gate, and it stays updated all the time. This is where we get to have a little bit of fun and start doing fancy things, and I'm kind of doing this off the top of my head. I'll admit, I did try this out once to make sure that I wasn't crazy, and it turns out I'm not crazy. I don't exactly remember what I did, so if I break this on the way, cool, you just get to watch me unbreak it. Okay, conceptually, what I want to have happen is the moment we walk into this trigger's volume, and we're going to create this button, I want us to, instead of creating the button, call on a separate function, a separate group of nodes whose job is to say, hey, what kind of button do we need? And then if we need that kind of, if we need like the open button, it'll create the open button. If we need the close button, it'll create the close button. By the way, I've let something slip, if you're paying attention. I said open button and close button. It's going to be two different buttons. We can't change that value. We can't change the name on the fly. So what we're going to do is destroy one button that says open, make another one that says close. So to make all this happen, we are going to create a custom event. So let's go over to new event, and let's choose actually, I'm sorry, where do they hide these days? New event, console event, remote event. Thank you. They're not custom events, they're remote events. I keep thinking of them as custom events. Now, this is currently named default event, which is not super useful to us. We're going to call this portcullis button process. Why do we call it that? Because it's processing the portcullis button. You'll see why here in just a minute. Now, the first thing this is going to need to do is check and see what type of button we need to create. We should be able to gauge that based on the current state of the gate. If the gate is open, we need a button that says close. If the gate is closed, we need a button that says open. We already have that information. We're already storing it. So let's start from there. We'll grab another compare bool, and because I don't want to have to create another one, I'll just duplicate one that I had lying around, and I'll cut all the wires off of it. And we'll grab portcullis open again. So this is the value we're actually going to be checking. So as soon as this event is fired, it's going to say, hey, what's the gate doing right now? Is it open or is it closed? If the gate is closed, which is our default state, then we want to create a button that says open. That's easy. We've already got a node that does that. So we'll just duplicate that, bring that down here, and there we go. Now, if the gate is already open, we need a different button that tells us to close it. So I think I've said that right. It's easy to get my logic messed up when I'm talking. Okay, so we have the exact same node, but we do need to jump into the setup for that button and make sure we take the zone properties. Let me make this nice and big so that everybody can see as best I can. So under zone, you'll see caption. Set this to close gate, like so. Okay, so now we're creating the appropriate button. That's fine. However, we now need to change what our trigger does. Our trigger no longer needs to make buttons. Actually, let me not undo that one. Instead of actually creating a button, he needs to now call on our portcullis button process. Basically, he's going to say, all right, they've come within range of the trigger. Now I want this guy whose job it is to figure out which button we're going to need to just do his job. The way we do that is by right-clicking, go to New Action, jump down to Event, and activate Remote Event. Now, because, again, I don't want to type anything as long as portcullis button process, I'm going to copy that, come over here to Sequence, Activate Remote Event, take the event name, set it, press Enter like so, and then when we touch, we will fire this off. When we untouch, we are going to remove whatever button you created. Notice that both the buttons have the same name, they just have a different caption. That means we can still use this to delete stuff, which is very handy. Okay, so this should get us started. It's not perfect yet, but I'm going to show you where it's not perfect before we go any further. So let's jump back in, give this a test. This is so cool. All right, so we walk up, here it comes, and then here you go, boom, open gate. And we hit it, and it doesn't change. Okay, but don't let that freak you out. The next time I come in, it says close gate. I back away, come back in, and now it says open gate. So it's mostly there. Mostly there. Mostly. The only thing we need to do from here is make sure that when we press this button, we also call this remote event to make sure he gets to do his job again. There's a little bit of a catch to this. The first thing I'm going to have this guy do when we first call this remote event is we're going to have him destroy whatever button might happen to be there. That is just a catch-all. You'll see why this is handy in a minute, because this means now we can come over to when we press the button, and we can just take the activate remote event, duplicate him, stick him right in between. So we press the button, we tell this guy, hey, do your job, and let's actually walk through it, okay? So we walk up, we get within range of the trigger. As soon as that happens, we fire off our remote event. What does he do? He says, okay, remove this input zone. There's no input zone to remove. I don't think that's going to cause any errors, but I should, well, I'll check in a minute. That should be just fine. 99% sure that'll be fine. Then we're going to compare and see which button we need, and we'll make an intelligent decision as to which button we have to have. We'll create the appropriate button. Now, this is the point where the player can walk up and actually press this button. They're going to press it. We're going to tell this guy to do his job again. Ooh, we might be doing this out of order. What do you think? You think we're doing it out of order? I had to check now. I would just keep walking through it, but now we have to check. Come on. Load, load, load. I think we're doing it kind of out of order. So let's walk up. Open gate. Nope, close gate. Open gate. We're not doing it out of order. I should have just gone with it, right? That uncertainty kind of betrayed me. So if you can see this on the live stream, if you look really close, the name is actually updating. When I hit open, it's open. When I hit close, it's closing. So let me go ahead and pretend like I was totally confident that was going to work out just fine the whole time. So as soon as we press the button, we are checking the portcullis button. We're basically saying do your job again. He's removing this, and he's checking to see which button we need and creating the appropriate button. And then we are playing our matinee. That means that we get that nice updating the whole time we play. Now, one more time before we completely walk away from this. Doom, 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 doom. So we walk up, and we get our button. And so right now it says close gate. We walk away, and the button just disappears. Gate stays up because we didn't change it. When we walk back up, that little guy's still doing his job to make sure we get the right button, so we can always go back and close it. It's kind of like we've created a persistent situation where we can always go back. Now we have one more thing left, and you just saw me expose it. We can still walk right through this portcullis, and that's less than ideal. So we're going to fix that really quickly and easily by way of a dynamic blocking volume. So select your portcullis at this point. Right-click on your cube builder brush, and 256 by 256 by 256 is not going to work. I actually have some values in mind. Normally, if I didn't have those values in mind, I would just create a 256 brick, and I would use geometry mode to scale it. But I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I think I found that 360 works pretty well in X. Y is our thin dimension. We need that to be a little bit thicker than the thickness of the gate, and that's because if you don't do that, the camera can just get right in on those polygons, and it looks a little weirder than you'd think it would. So we're going to kick that up to about 32, and our height can be, I mean, we can't climb over 512. Actually, in this game, we can't climb over much at all, but we'll do 512 anyway. Build, and there it is. So we can close this window, and let's take the red builder brush, and we're just going to slide it up so it fits reasonably well around the gate. Doesn't have to be perfect. However, we didn't have to go fishing for the red builder brush, you might have noticed. The reason being is that I selected the portcullis first. So if you've already going to create, you've made your red builder brush and it's somewhere out in space and you don't know where it is, be sure to select your object first, and then when you go and click build your brush, it will build it at the origin of whatever you have selected. So it's a nice way to get the red builder brush wherever you need it to be. And in this case, it's automatically sent it up on the gate. So that's well, mostly beautiful, except that I've got to slide it back up, even though I did that once already. So now let's come over here and create a volume. We're going to make a dynamic blocking volume. That means it is a blocking volume that blocks things, and it's going to be dynamic, meaning it can move around. So we'll create that. Let's move the red builder brush out of the way, and here we have our very masculine pink volume sitting right here at our portcullis. Now we want this volume to move with the gate. I'm not going to worry about recreating the matinee or anything fun like that. Instead, press F4 to open up the properties for the dynamic blocking volume. Lock this properties window, so hit the little padlock button. Next, come down to the attachment category, select your portcullis, and then right there at the very top you'll see the base property. Click the green arrow, and now what that means is that wherever the portcullis goes, the blocking volume is just going to go to. So with all of that in place, let's just go ahead and give this one more quick test. Okay, awesome. And we fly up to the gate. We get our button, that's awesome. And I just can't walk through the gate. The neat thing about this is, if you remember the navigation system that was used in Citadel, where you can click on the ground and you get the gold spinny arrow and you try to run to the arrow like a lemming, as we click, we actually, that will nullify our movement and thereby cancel that. Because if you didn't know, if you try to walk through stuff in Epic Citadel, if you get like kind of obstructed by something, it will quit trying to navigate you after a second. So we get actual proof that this is blocking us. I do like how that one bar just smacks us right in the face, though. That makes me fundamentally happy. So let's open the gate and let's try it again. And there we've proved that the blocking volume is indeed getting out of our way. We can close the gate and step back so we don't get our toes crushed. And thump, now we can't get back in until we reopen, of course. So there's a quick look at making Epic Citadel into something interactive. Now I'm going to show you something. Or I guess to be more precise, I'm going to try to show you something because I've got to show you something that is on my iPad, and I can't see if I have the iPad placed. So I'm going to be like checking my monitor. Hang on. Okay, it's got to load. When you first deploy something to UDK, the first time you open it up, there will be a bit of a load time. That is mostly because it's caching shaders. So while it's building the shaders, you've got to wait that out and stare at the amazingly gorgeous UDK logo. Okay, so I'm going to do this as best I can. Okay. All right. Well, you'll at least be able to see it. Let me get us up to the door because I don't think I am capable of playing Citadel backwards facing a little tiny laptop screen angled behind the camera by my very talented technician. Okay, so here we are. And if you can see that, there's a little tiny button. Obviously, I didn't use relative sizing for that button because it's very tiny on an iPad screen. But if I hit that button, there you go, then you can see the gate go up. And then we can move through that just like you saw here on the screen. So it deploys, it works. You could use this as a basis to take Epic Citadel and turn it into a murder mystery where more and more of the story kept getting exposed to you as you pass around. Or you could have doors that you could open and close, or you could add puzzles. All kinds of fun stuff you could do, and it's entirely with Kismet. So we're about to take a break. But before we do, I want to go for just a moment kind of review what we've talked about so far. So we talked a little bit about getting set up for iOS deployment. Obviously that means you need to go to Apple and become an Apple developer. It's 99 bucks, but that's Apple. Get it paid for, it's good for a year, and then you can deploy as many things as you want to as many iOS devices as you like. I think it's up to 99 actually, but hopefully you don't need any more than 99 devices. I got 99 devices and all right, I won't continue. Okay, so we also talked about the tools that you need. Obviously, UDK Remote is very handy. We haven't used that yet, but we'll be taking a look at that just a little bit later. We took a look at Epic Citadel and showed how you can easily add some interactivity to that by way of Kismet, which I think is just a fun little exercise. And then we showed that off in the sense that I can deploy the custom Zak version of Epic Citadel with interactive doors right here onto my iPad. So when we come back, we're going to take a look at a couple of other games, that one of which is actually included with UDK, and we'll show how UDK Remote can be used to help you test that out. We'll talk about how that game was created. We're also going to be taking a look at the racing game and the UDK MOBA game. That's all coming up here in about 5 minutes, so we'll see you soon.